The dust kicked up around Willow Jensen's boots as she dragged the hoe through the unforgiving ground, sweat streaming down her face despite the early morning hour in Calico, California, where the Mojave Desert seemed determined to reclaim every inch of cultivated land. She had been working this patch of rocky soil for 3 months now, ever since she had arrived from Missouri with nothing but a wagon, a mule, and the stubborn belief that she could make something grow where everyone else saw only stones and failure. The year was 1885, and the silver mining town had seen better days. Most of the prospectors had moved on when the mines started producing less ore, leaving behind a scattered community of the determined and the desperate. Willow figured she belonged to both categories. At 22 years old, she had left behind everything familiar after her father died and her stepmother made it clear there was no place for her in the family home anymore. California had seemed like a fresh start, a place where a woman alone might carve out an existence if she worked hard enough. She straightened her back and surveyed the quarter-acre she had managed to purchase with the last of her savings. Rocky soil was an understatement. The ground seemed more stone than earth, and every vegetable bed she tried to establish required hours of backbreaking work to remove rocks, haul in whatever organic matter she could find, and coax the desert earth into something resembling farmable land. "Still trying to grow turnips in that mess, Miss Jensen," called out old Mr. Patterson from his porch next door. He ran a small general store and had been one of the few people in town who had not laughed openly when she announced her plans. "Carrots today," Willow called back, wiping her forehead with her sleeve. "The turnips are over there." She pointed to a small section where green tops were actually visible above the soil, a sight that filled her with more pride than seemed reasonable. "Well, I will be," Patterson said, squinting across the distance. "You actually got something to grow." "Told you I would," Willow said, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. It had taken countless trips to haul water from the community well, careful mixing of every scrap of compost she could create, and endless hours of removing rocks. But she had managed to create small pockets of soil where vegetables would actually grow. It was not much, but it was hers and it was working. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn toward the road. A rider was approaching, sitting tall in the saddle on a sturdy bay horse. As he drew closer, Willow could see he was young, probably not much older than she was, with sun-browned skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, dusty from travel, and led a pack mule behind his horse. The rider slowed as he passed her property, his eyes taking in the unusual sight of someone actually trying to farm in Calico. Most people kept kitchen gardens if they bothered with vegetables at all, and even those were struggling affairs. What Willow was attempting was far more ambitious. "Morning," he called out, touching the brim of his hat politely. "Morning," Willow replied, her hand shading her eyes from the sun. The cowboy seemed about to ride on, then hesitated. "That is quite an undertaking you have got there." "It is coming along," Willow said, a bit defensively. She was used to skepticism by now. "I was not criticizing," the man said quickly. He dismounted and walked his horse closer to the fence line, though he was careful not to intrude on her property. "I grew up on a ranch in Texas, and my mother kept a big vegetable garden. I know how much work goes into something like this, especially in soil that does not want to cooperate." Willow felt her defensiveness ease slightly. "It is more rock than soil, truth be told, but I am determined to make it work." "I can see that," he said, and there was respect in his voice. "My name is Vince Jarrett. People call me Vince. I just hired on at the McAllister Ranch about 5 miles north of here." "Willow Jensen," she replied, walking over to the fence. Up close, She could see that Vince had kind eyes, a deep brown that seemed honest and direct. His hands, as he held the reins, were work-worn and capable. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Jensen," Vince said. "How long have you been working on this?" 3 months, Willow admitted. "I know it does not look like much." 3 months, Vince looked at the property with new appreciation. "You have done all this yourself in 3 months. That is impressive. Really impressive. Back home, we had 3 hired hands just to maintain the garden, and the soil was a lot better than this." Willow felt a flush of pleasure at the genuine admiration in his voice. "I want to grow enough vegetables to sell at the market. There is good money in fresh produce here since most everything has to be brought in from elsewhere. If I can get established, I could actually make a living." "That is smart thinking," Vince said. "McAllister pays fair, but ranch work is hard, and I have been thinking about what I might do long term. Not many cowboys can keep doing this work once they get older, but everyone always needs to eat." They talked for a few more minutes, easy conversation that surprised Willow with how natural it felt. She had been so focused on her work since arriving in Calico that she had not really made friends, and certainly had not taken time to notice men. But there was something about Vince's straightforward manner and the way he looked at her garden like he understood exactly how much effort she had put into it that made her warm to him. Finally, he tipped his hat again. "I should get to the ranch. But Miss Jensen, if you ever need a hand with anything, I ride past here most Sundays on my way to town. I would be happy to help. I mean that sincerely." "That is kind of you, Mr. Jarrett," Willow said. "Vince," he corrected with a smile. "And I mean it. My mother always said that good honest work, especially growing things, is something worth supporting." He mounted his horse and rode off, leaving Willow standing by her fence with an odd flutter in her chest that she told herself was just the exertion of the morning's work. Over the next weeks, Willow threw herself into expanding her garden. The turnips were nearly ready to harvest, and she had managed to get beans, carrots, and even some tomatoes started. The tomatoes were her pride and joy, coaxed along in the sunniest, most protected corner of her property where she had built a small windbreak from scrap wood. True to his word, Vince rode past on Sunday mornings, and each time he stopped to chat. The conversations grew longer each week. He told her about the McAllister Ranch, a mid-sized cattle operation that was doing well despite the declining fortunes of Calico itself. She told him about Missouri, about her father who had been a schoolteacher and had taught her to read and figure well enough that she could manage business matters herself. She did not talk much about why she had left, and Vince did not push, which she appreciated. On the 4th Sunday, Vince arrived earlier than usual, just as Willow was struggling to move a large flat stone she wanted to use to edge one of her beds. "Let me help with that," he said, dismounting quickly. "You do not have to," Willow protested, but Vince was already striding over. "I know I do not have to," he said. "I want to. Besides, that stone is too heavy for one person, and I would feel terrible riding past and knowing you might hurt yourself trying to move it alone." Together, they shifted the stone into place. Then Vince looked around at the various projects in progress and said, "What else needs doing, Vince? I cannot ask you to spend your day off working," Willow said. "You are not asking. I am offering," he replied. "Honestly, Miss Jensen, I would like to help, unless you would rather I did not." The hopeful look in his eyes made Willow's resolve crumble. "If you are sure you do not mind, I could use help building frames for the beans. They need something to climb, and I have been trying to figure out how to construct something sturdy enough." They spent the morning working together. Vince proved to be skilled with his hands, quickly constructing simple but effective frames from branches and twine. As they worked, they talked about everything and nothing. their conversation flowing easily. Willow found herself laughing more than she had in months, and the work seemed to go twice as fast with company. "You have a good plan here," Vince said as they surveyed the bean frames. "These should work perfectly. In a few weeks, you will have beans climbing all over these." "I hope so," Willow said. "Every successful crop means I am one step closer to making this actually profitable." "You will get there," Vince said with certainty. "You have got the determination for it. I can see that." When noon arrived, Willow felt bold enough to say, "I do not have much, but I could make us some lunch if you would like to stay a bit longer." Vince's face lit up. "I would like that very much." Inside her small cabin, Willow felt suddenly self-conscious about how sparse her living quarters were. She had a table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner, and a small stove. That was about it, but Vince did not seem to notice or care about the lack of furnishings. "This is cozy," he said sincerely. "Reminds me of the line shack back on my family's ranch in Texas. Sometimes I would stay out there for weeks during calving season. A person does not need much to be comfortable." Willow made a simple meal of biscuits, beans, and a bit of salt pork. They ate companionably, and Vince complimented her cooking with such genuine appreciation that Willow suspected he had been living on his own rough trail cooking for too long. "Can I ask you something?" Vince said as they finished eating. "Why Calico? This is a hard place to try to start anything, let alone a farm." Willow was quiet for a moment, then decided honesty was best. "I needed somewhere I could afford land, and somewhere far enough from Missouri that my past would not follow me." Calico met both requirements. "That past must have been pretty difficult," Vince said gently. "My father died," Willow said. "He remarried when I was 16, and his new wife had her own children. When he passed 2 years later, she made it clear I was not part of her family. I had a little money he had left me, enough to get here and buy this land. It was not much of a choice, really. Stay and be a burden, or leave and try to make my own way." "That must have taken a lot of courage," Vince said. "Or desperation," Willow replied with a slight smile. "I am still not sure which." "Can I tell you something?" Vince asked. "I left Texas for similar reasons. My father has a ranch, and it was always understood that my older brother would inherit it. There was not much future for me there except working for my brother eventually. I wanted something that was mine, something I built, so I left to work and save money and figure out what that something might be." "Have you figured it out yet?" Willow asked. "Maybe," Vince said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I am starting to see possibilities I had not considered before." The moment stretched between them, charged with something unspoken but understood. Then Vince stood, clearing his throat slightly. "I should head back to the ranch. But Miss Jensen, Willow, may I come back next Sunday?" "I would like that," Willow said softly. "I would like that very much." As spring turned toward summer, Sunday became the day Willow looked forward to most. Vince arrived faithfully each week, and together they worked on expanding and improving her garden. He helped her build a proper irrigation system, digging channels and constructing simple sluices that allowed her to water more efficiently. He showed her tricks for keeping the desert rabbits away from the young plants and helped her construct better windbreaks. But more than the physical help, Willow treasured the companionship. Vince made her laugh with stories about the ranch hands and their antics. He listened with genuine interest when she talked about her plans for expanding her operation. And gradually, the space between them began to feel less like a polite distance between acquaintances, and more like a charged awareness of each other. One Sunday in late June, after they had spent the morning harvesting the first substantial crop of beans and carrots, Vince said, "The ranch is having a social next Saturday. There will be music and dancing and food. Would you come with me?" Willow's heart jumped. Like a proper date. Like a proper date, Vince confirmed, his eyes warm. I know we have been dancing around this for weeks now, and I am not much good at subtle, so I am just going to say it plain. I have feelings for you, Willow, real feelings. I look forward to Sundays all week. I think about you when I am working. And I would like to court you properly if you are open to that. Willow felt her face flush with pleasure. I think about you too, she admitted. More than I probably should, given how much work I need to be focused on. But yes, Vince, I would love to go to the social with you. And yes to the courting too. Vince's smile was brilliant. He reached out and gently took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. You have made me very happy just now. You have made me happy too, Willow said. I did not expect this when I came to California. I was just focused on surviving, but you have made everything better. The ranch social was held in a large barn that had been cleaned out and decorated with lanterns and wildflowers. When Vince arrived to collect Willow that Saturday, his eyes widened with appreciation. She had made herself a new dress from fabric she had splurged on at Patterson's store, a simple but flattering design in a soft blue that brought out her eyes. You look beautiful, Vince said, and the sincerity in his voice made Willow's heart flutter. You clean up pretty well yourself, she replied. Vince had clearly made an effort, his hair neatly trimmed, his shirt and pants clean and pressed. He looked handsome and a bit nervous, which Willow found endearing. The social was lively and welcoming. Vince introduced Willow to his fellow ranch hands and to the McAllister family. Mrs. McAllister, a warm woman in her 40s, immediately took to Willow. So you are the young woman with the vegetable garden, she said. Vince talks about you and your farm constantly. He is very impressed with what you are accomplishing. He has been a tremendous help, Willow said, glancing at Vince, who looked pleased but embarrassed by his employer's words. Well, once you start selling your produce, come talk to me, Mrs. McAllister said. We feed a lot of people here, and I would much rather buy fresh vegetables from a neighbor than pay the prices the freight wagons charge. As the evening progressed, Willow found herself fully enjoying the music and dancing. Vince was a good dancer, confident in his movements and attentive to her. When he held her during the slower dances, Willow felt safe and valued in a way she had not experienced in years. I am glad you came, Vince murmured during one such dance. So am I, Willow replied, looking up at him. In the lantern light, his face was all plains and shadows, handsome and dear. She realized with a start that she was falling in love with him, this kind cowboy who had stopped to compliment her garden and had stayed to help her build a life. As if reading her thoughts, Vince drew her slightly closer, respectable but intimate. Willow, I know we have not been courting long, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. I am not playing at this. Neither am I, Willow said softly. Vince, I care about you, more than I thought possible in such a short time. Good, he said, his eyes crinkling with his smile. That is very good. The summer passed in a blur of hard work and growing affection. Willow's garden flourished beyond her hopes. The irrigation system Vince had helped her build made all the difference, and the vegetables grew lush and productive. She started selling at the weekly market in town, and to her delight, found eager customers. Mrs. McAllister became one of her best clients, regularly buying large quantities of produce for the ranch kitchen. With the money coming in, Willow was able to expand her operation. She purchased more tools and seeds, and even hired occasional help from some of the local boys to assist with the heaviest work. But Vince remained her primary helper, showing up every Sunday without fail, and often stopping by on weekday evenings after his ranch work was done. Their courtship deepened naturally. They were comfortable together, able to work side by side for hours without needing constant conversation, but also able to talk about their hopes and fears and dreams. Vince told her more about his family in Texas, about growing up as the second son and always feeling like he was looking for his place in the world. Willow shared more about her lonely years after her father remarried, feeling like an outsider in her own home. "We both understand what it is like to not quite fit," Vince said one evening as they sat on Willow's small porch, watching the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. "Maybe that is why we fit so well together." "Maybe," Willow agreed, leaning against his shoulder. She loved these quiet moments as much as the active working ones. In August, Vince arrived one Sunday looking unusually serious. Willow felt a flutter of anxiety. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," Vince assured her quickly. "Actually, everything is better than fine. I have some news. McAllister has offered me the job of foreman. His current foreman is retiring and moving to live with his daughter in San Francisco. It is a good position with better pay and a small house on the property." "Vince, that is wonderful," Willow exclaimed, hugging him. "You deserve this. You work so hard." "There is more," Vince said, taking her hands in his. "Willow, with this new position, I will be making enough to support a family. I will have a house. I will have stability. And I love you. I have loved you for months now. I want to marry you if you will have me." Willow felt tears spring to her eyes. "You love me." "So much it sometimes scares me," Vince said honestly. "You are the strongest, most determined woman I have ever met. You are beautiful and smart, and you make me laugh. I love working beside you. I love talking with you. I love the life we are building together. Willow, will you marry me?" "Yes," Willow said, the word coming out as half laugh, half sob. "Yes, Vince, I will marry you. I love you too. I have for a while now, but I was afraid to say it, afraid it was too soon or that you might not feel the same." Vince pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I feel the same. I have never been more sure of anything." They were married in September in a simple ceremony at the small church in Calico. Mrs. McAllister helped Willow make a proper wedding dress, and the whole ranch turned out for the celebration. Even old Mr. Patterson closed his store for the afternoon to attend, giving Willow a beautiful set of kitchen knives as a wedding gift. "For all those vegetables you will be preparing," he said with a wink. Moving into the foreman's house on the McAllister ranch was bittersweet for Willow. She loved the house, which was small but well built with a real bedroom, a proper kitchen, and even a sitting room. But she worried about her garden. "We will figure it out," Vince assured her. "The house is only 5 miles from your land. We can go back and forth. And maybe eventually we can buy more land adjacent to what you already own, build our own place there." They worked out a system where Willow spent 3 days a week at her garden property, staying in her old cabin, and 4 days at the ranch house with Vince. It was not ideal, but it worked. Vince helped whenever his foreman duties allowed, and on weekends they worked together at the garden, continuing to improve and expand it. The first winter of their marriage was a learning experience. Willow had to figure out what would grow in the cooler months, experimenting with different cold, hardy vegetables. Vince had to settle into his new responsibilities as foreman, managing the ranch hands and answering to McAllister directly. But they supported each other through the challenges, and their love deepened with each obstacle they overcame together. One evening in February, as they sat by the fire in their ranch house, Willow said, "I have been thinking about the future." "What about it?" Vince asked, looking up from the harness he was mending. "My garden is doing well, but it is reaching the limits of what I can manage alone, even with your help. I was thinking, what if we started looking seriously at buying more land? We could build a real farm, something we both own and work together. You have talked about wanting something of your own, and I have the garden. What if we combined those dreams? Vince set aside the harness, his full attention on her now. A farm, like a real working farm. Why not? Willow said, warming to her idea. We could keep growing vegetables, but also add some livestock. Maybe chickens for eggs, a dairy cow, eventually some beef cattle. You know ranching and I know growing things. Together we could build something substantial. I love it, Vince said, moving to sit beside her. I love the idea, but it will take money. I have been saving from the garden sales, Willow said, and you have your foreman wages. If we are careful and keep saving, in a year or two we might have enough for a down payment on more land. They talked late into the night, planning and dreaming. The vision of their own farm took shape between them, a shared goal that excited them both. Vince's experience with cattle and Willow's success with vegetables could complement each other perfectly. They could build something meaningful, something lasting. Spring brought renewed energy to their plans. Willow expanded her garden again, and Vince negotiated with McAllister to have one day each week free for his own work. McAllister, who had become a friend as well as an employer, approved readily. You are a good foreman, Vince, McAllister said. And I respect a man who wants to build something for himself. Just give me fair notice before you leave entirely so I can find and train your replacement. That could be years yet, Vince said. We are still saving, but I appreciate your understanding. In May, Willow realized her monthly courses had not come. At first, she dismissed it as stress or the physical demands of the farm work. But when another month passed, she had to acknowledge the truth. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complicated mix of emotions. Joy, certainly, that she and Vince would have a child, but also anxiety about how this would affect their plans and their work. The garden was thriving and demanding more attention than ever. How would she manage when she was heavily pregnant? And after the baby came, she waited until evening to tell Vince when they were alone in their ranch house. I have some news, she said, her voice betraying her nervousness. Vince looked up immediately, sensing the importance of the moment. What is it? I am pregnant, Willow said simply. We are going to have a baby. For a moment, Vince just stared at her, processing. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He crossed the room in 3 strides and swept her into his arms, careful but exuberant. A baby, he said in wonder. We are going to have a baby. Willow, this is incredible. You are happy? Willow asked, some of her anxiety easing at his reaction. Happy, I am thrilled, Vince said. Are you not happy? I am, Willow assured him. I am very happy. I was just worried about the timing with the garden and all our plans. We will figure it out, Vince said firmly. We always do. This is wonderful news, Willow, the best news. As her pregnancy progressed, Vince became even more attentive and protective. He insisted she not lift anything heavy and took on more of the physical labor at the garden. Willow found this both endearing and occasionally frustrating, as she was used to doing everything herself. I am pregnant, not fragile, she told him more than once. I know, Vince would reply, but you are carrying our child and I will not take any chances with either of you. Mrs. McAllister was a godsend during this time. Having raised 4 children herself, she had practical advice for everything from morning sickness to preparing for the birth. She also helped Willow hire a young woman named Sarah to assist with the garden work, paying half the wages herself in exchange for first pick of the vegetables. You need help, dear, Mrs. McAllister said firmly when Willow tried to protest the generosity. And I need vegetables. This works out well for both of us. In December, during a cold snap unusual for California, Willow went into labor. Vince had been prepared for this moment for weeks, but when it actually arrived, he became nearly useless with anxiety. Mrs. McAllister arrived with a midwife and shooed him out of the bedroom. "Go boil water or pace or do whatever nervous fathers do," she said briskly. "We will call you when you have a baby to meet." The labor was long and difficult. Willow had always been strong, but this tested her in ways she had never imagined. Through the pain and exhaustion, she held onto the thought of the baby, of meeting the child she and Vince had created together. Finally, as dawn broke, a baby's cry filled the house. The midwife cleaned and wrapped the infant, then placed the baby in Willow's arms. "You have a son," she said with a smile. Willow looked down at the tiny face, red and scrunched and perfect, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. Vince was called in moments later. He approached the bed with almost comical caution, as if afraid he might break something. Then he saw the baby and tears sprang to his eyes. "A son," he said in wonder. "We have a son." "We do," Willow said softly. "Do you want to hold him?" With exaggerated care, Vince took the baby in his arms. The infant was so tiny against his work-hardened hands, and the contrast made Willow's heart squeeze. Vince looked at their son with such pure love and awe that she knew, with absolute certainty, that she had chosen the right man to build a life with. They named him William, after Willow's father. Little William was a good baby, healthy and strong despite arriving a few weeks early. The first months were exhausting, with sleepless nights and constant feedings, but Willow found joy in every moment. Vince was a devoted father, helping with nighttime feedings and taking the baby for walks around the ranch property whenever he could. "I never knew I could love someone this much," Vince said one night, holding William while Willow tried to catch a few hours of sleep. "It is like my heart got bigger when he arrived." The garden had to take a back seat during those early months, but Sarah proved to be an excellent worker, and with Willow's instructions, she managed to keep things going through the winter. By spring, when William was old enough to be left with Mrs. McAllister, for periods of time, Willow was ready to get back to work. "I missed this," she admitted to Vince as they worked together in the garden, William sleeping peacefully in a basket in the shade. "I love being a mother, but I also love this, working the soil, making things grow." "You are good at both," Vince said. "Our son is thriving and so is your garden. You are amazing, Willow." As William grew, so did their farm plans. They had continued saving steadily, and by his second birthday, they had enough for a down payment on 40 acres adjacent to Willow's original quarter-acre. The land was rough, but no worse than what Willow had already conquered, and it had a year-round spring that would make irrigation much easier. The decision to buy the land was enormous. It would mean leaving the security of Vince's foreman position eventually. It would mean taking on debt and uncertainty. But as they stood on the property, looking out at the possibilities, they both knew it was the right choice. "We can do this," Willow said, squeezing Vince's hand. "I know we can." "Together, we can do anything," Vince agreed. The process of developing the new property took years. Vince continued as foreman while they slowly built up their farm infrastructure. They started with expanding the vegetable operation, using Willow's proven techniques to create more productive beds. Then they added chickens, building a secure coop that protected the birds from predators. A dairy cow came next, providing milk for their family and eventually butter and cheese to sell. William grew into a lively, curious boy who loved following his parents around the farm. By the time he was 4, he was already helping in small ways, collecting eggs and pulling weeds. Willow made a point to teach him about plants and growing things, while Vince taught him about animals and ranching. "He is going to grow up knowing how to work," Vince said with satisfaction one evening, "and knowing the value of the land." In the summer when William was 5, Willow realized she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with less anxiety. They were more established now, with systems in place and help hired. She knew what to expect from pregnancy and childbirth, and while she was not looking forward to the difficult parts, she was excited to expand their family. Their second child, a daughter they named Alina, arrived in early spring. She was a calmer baby than William had been, with Vince's dark eyes and Willow's stubborn chin. William was initially skeptical of this small intruder, but within days, he had appointed himself her protector and helper. "My baby," he would say possessively, wanting to be involved in everything to do with his sister. With 2 children now, Willow had to be even more organized and efficient. She continued to amaze Vince with her ability to manage the household, care for the children, and still oversee the expanding farm operation. They had hired more help by now, including a permanent farm hand named Tom who lived in a small cabin on the property and assisted with everything from planting to harvest to animal care. By 1893, when William was 7 and Alina was 2, their farm was well established and profitable. The vegetable operation alone brought in steady income, but they had also expanded into beef cattle, running a small herd on their acreage. Vince had finally given notice at the McAllister Ranch, though he maintained a warm friendship with his former employers and often consulted with McAllister on cattle matters. "We did it," Vince said one evening as they sat on the porch of the house they had built on their property. It was larger than the foreman's cottage had been, with room for their growing family and a big kitchen where Willow could preserve her produce. "We actually built this." "We did," Willow agreed, watching William chase fireflies in the yard while Alina dozed in her lap. "It has been hard work, but worth every bit of it." "I think about that first day I rode past your 1/4 acre," Vince said. "You were out there in that rocky soil, determined to make something grow. I was impressed then, but I had no idea just how remarkable you were." "I was just desperate and stubborn," Willow said with a laugh. "You were determined," Vince corrected. "And brave. You took rocky soil that everyone said was worthless and made it productive. You built this whole farm from almost nothing. You are the strongest person I know." "We built it together," Willow said, reaching for his hand. "I could not have done this without you. Your help, your knowledge, your support, all of it was essential. We are partners in this, Vince." "Partners and much more," Vince said, leaning over to kiss her gently. Even after years of marriage, his kisses still made her heart flutter. "I love you, Willow, more now than even when we first married." "I love you too," Willow said. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for seeing what I was trying to do and wanting to help. Thank you for building this life with me." As the years continued, their farm flourished. Calico itself remained a quiet town, never regaining its mining boom glory, but that suited Willow and Vince fine. They had built something solid and sustainable, not dependent on the vagaries of mineral strikes or boom and bust cycles. People would always need food, and they were providing it. William grew into a responsible young man who shared his parents' love of the land. He could handle livestock as well as Vince and had inherited Willow's green thumb. Alina, meanwhile, showed a head for business, keeping careful records of sales and expenses by the time she was 10 and suggesting ways to improve their profit margins. "She is going to run this place someday," Vince said with pride. "Or she will run something bigger," Willow replied. "She has ambitions beyond this farm, I think." They had more children, 2 more boys who arrived in quick succession when Alina was 6 and 7. The house was full and loud and sometimes chaotic, but it was also filled with love and laughter. Willow sometimes thought back to her lonely younger years, feeling like she did not belong anywhere, and marveled at how her life had transformed. One day in 1899, when William was 15 and helping Vince with the cattle, Alina was 10 and keeping the farm accounts, and the younger boys were in school in town. Willow stood in the middle of her vegetable fields and took stock. The rocky soil of 15 years ago had been completely transformed. Beds of rich, dark earth stretched in orderly rows, producing abundant crops of every vegetable that could grow in California's climate. The irrigation system had been expanded and improved over the years. Greenhouses protected tender plants. The whole operation was efficient and productive, but more than that, it was hers. Theirs. She and Vince had built this together. From that first quarter-acre of stubborn rock to a thriving 40-acre farm that supported their family and provided livelihoods for several employees. That evening, as they sat together on their porch watching the sunset, Willow said, "Do you remember what you said when you first stopped at my garden? You said it was quite an undertaking." Vince laughed. "I remember. I thought you were brave, bordering on crazy, trying to grow vegetables in that soil." "I was both," Willow admitted, "but you saw something in it. You saw something in me. You stopped and you stayed and you helped me build all of this." "We helped each other," Vince said. "You taught me that determination and hard work can transform anything, even rocky soil. And we transformed more than just the land. We built a family. We built a life. We built a future." "The best future I could have imagined," Willow said, leaning against his shoulder. "Better than my wildest dreams back when I was that desperate young woman with a quarter-acre and more rocks than soil." "You were never just desperate," Vince said gently. "You were hopeful. That is different. You had hoped that you could make something of that land, and that hope proved justified." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, listening to the sounds of their children inside the house, the lowing of cattle in the distance, the chirp of crickets in the fields. It was a peaceful symphony of the life they had created together. As the new century dawned in 1900, the Jensen farm was recognized throughout the region as a model operation. Willow's vegetables were famous for their quality, and Vince's cattle were known for their health and good breeding. Other farmers came to learn from them, and Willow and Vince were always generous with their knowledge and advice. "We were helped when we needed it," Willow told Vince when he remarked on how much time she spent teaching others. "Mrs. McAllister helped me. You helped me. Even old Mr. Patterson helped me with credit when I needed it. We should help others the same way." William decided to stay on the farm after finishing school, taking on more responsibility and proving himself a capable farmer and rancher. Alina, as Willow had predicted, had bigger ambitions. She went to San Francisco for business school, one of the first women in their family to pursue higher education. The younger boys were still finding their paths, but both showed promise. In 1905, Willow and Vince celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a big party, inviting friends and neighbors from throughout the region. The celebration was held in their large barn, decorated with flowers from Willow's garden and lanterns Vince had hung himself. As they danced together, just as they had at the McAllister Ranch social 2 decades earlier, Willow looked up at Vince and marveled at how the years had been kind to them. His hair was touched with gray now, and his face was more weathered, but his eyes still held that same kindness and determination that had drawn her to him from the beginning. "What are you thinking?" Vince asked, noticing her expression. "I am thinking how lucky I am," Willow said honestly. "How lucky I was that you rode past my garden that day. How lucky I am to have shared these 20 years with you. How lucky our children are to have you as a father." "I am the lucky one," Vince countered. "You took me in when I was just a cowboy with dreams but no clear path. You let me help you build something meaningful. You gave me a family and a purpose. Everything good in my life comes from you, Willow. From us, Willow corrected. Everything good comes from what we built together. As they continued to dance, surrounded by their children and friends, in the barn on the farm they had created from rocky soil and determination, Willow felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what success looked like. Not wealth or fame, but family and community and work that mattered. They had grown more than vegetables in that rocky soil. They had grown a beautiful life, one season at a time, one day at a time together. The years that followed brought the natural progression of life. William married a kind young woman from a neighboring farm, and they gave Willow and Vince their first grandchildren. Alina returned from San Francisco with a business degree and immediately began improving the farm's marketing and distribution, increasing profits substantially. The younger boys found their own paths, one becoming a veterinarian and the other a teacher. Through it all, Willow and Vince remained partners in every sense. They still worked the farm together, though they had more help now and took on less of the physical labor themselves. They had earned the right to slow down a bit, to enjoy the fruits of their decades of hard work. On Willow's 50th birthday in 1913, Vince took her back to the original quarter-acre where it had all started. The land was now part of their larger farm, but they had kept it maintained as a sort of memorial to their beginnings. "Look at this soil," Vince said, crouching down to run a handful of earth through his fingers. "Remember how rocky this was? Now it is the richest soil on the whole property." "We removed a lot of rocks," Willow said with a laugh. "Countless loads of rocks." "We did more than remove rocks," Vince said, standing and taking her hands. "We transformed this place, and in the process we transformed our lives." "Willow, when I stopped here that first day, I saw a determined woman trying to grow vegetables. But what I found was so much more. I found my partner, my love, my life. Everything I have, everything I am, is because of what we built together." Willow felt tears prick her eyes. "I feel the same way. You know, before I met you, I was so focused on just surviving, on proving I could make it alone. I never imagined I could have this, a true partner who works beside me, who shares my dreams, who helps me build something lasting. You gave me that, Vince." "We gave it to each other," Vince said, pulling her close. "And I would do it all again, every hard day, every challenge, every obstacle, because it led to this, to us, to the life we have." They stood there in the field where their story had begun, holding each other as the sun set over the farm they had built together. The rocky soil that had once seemed impossible to cultivate now grew abundant vegetables. The land that had seemed worthless had become the foundation of a thriving farm and a beautiful life. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Smoke rose from the chimney of their farmhouse, where William's wife was preparing dinner for the extended family. The cattle in the pasture were settling for the night, and the chickens were roosting in their coop. Everything was as it should be. Everything they had worked for had come to fruition, richer and more abundant than they had dared to hope in those early days. They had started with rocky soil and determination, a young woman with more hope than resources, and a cowboy who saw the value in helping her. And they had harvested a beautiful life, full of love and family and purpose. As they walked back to the house, hand in hand, Willow looked at the land stretching around them and felt profound gratitude. This was the life they had grown together, cultivated with love and hard work and partnership. It had not always been easy. There had been droughts and pests and setbacks. There had been hard years when the crops failed and harder years when illness struck their family. But through it all, they had faced every challenge together, their partnership only growing stronger. "What are you grateful for tonight?" Vince asked, a question that had become a ritual between them over the years. "For you," Willow said simply. "For this life. For every day we have had together and every day we will still have. For rocky soil that taught us how to work hard. For vegetables that taught us patience. For children who taught us love. For it all, Vince. I am grateful for all of it." "As am I," Vince said, squeezing her hand gently. "As am I." They reached the house as the last light faded from the sky. Their family was gathering for dinner, the table that Vince had built with his own hands now surrounded by children and grandchildren. The food on that table had been grown on their land, raised with their care, prepared with love. It was the harvest of a beautiful life, grown from rocky soil by two determined people who had found each other and built something lasting. As they took their places at the table, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built, Willow caught Vince's eye across the table. He smiled at her, that same warm smile that had reassured her from their very first meeting, and she smiled back. No words were needed. They both knew how blessed they were, how far they had come, how much they had built together. This was their harvest, richer than any crop, more valuable than any amount of money. This was the beautiful life they had grown together in the rocky soil of California, season after season, year after year. And it was more abundant than either of them had ever dreamed possible. The evening passed in warmth and laughter, stories and good food. When the younger children finally went to bed and the house grew quiet, Willow and Vince sat on their porch one more time, looking out at the land they had transformed. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if I had not stopped that day?" Vince asked quietly. "Sometimes," Willow admitted. "I think I still would have made the farm work somehow. I was too stubborn to give up, but it would have been harder and lonelier. And I would have missed out on the best part of my life, which is sharing it with you." "I think about it too," Vince said. "I was just drifting back then, working jobs but not building anything. You gave me purpose and direction. You gave me a reason to put down roots. I am a better man because of you. We made each other better," Willow said. "That is what real partnership does. We challenged each other, supported each other, and helped each other grow into who we were meant to be." As the years continued to pass, Willow and Vince gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operation of the farm, though they never fully retired. William took over primary management, with Alina handling the business side from her office in San Francisco, where she had established a distribution network for their produce throughout California. The farm continued to thrive under the next generation's stewardship. Willow spent more time in her original garden area, which she maintained personally as a kind of laboratory for new varieties and techniques. She became known throughout the region as an expert on desert farming, and agricultural scientists from the state college came to study her methods. She always welcomed them, sharing her knowledge freely. "The land taught me everything I know," she would tell them. "I just learned to listen." Vince, meanwhile, mentored young ranchers who came to learn his techniques for raising healthy cattle in California's challenging climate. He was patient and generous with his knowledge, always remembering how much he had learned from others when he was starting out. In 1920, on a warm spring morning, Willow and Vince celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered for a big party, and even Alina came home from San Francisco, bringing her new husband with her. 35 years, Willow said wonderingly as they cut into the cake their daughter-in-law had made. "How did that happen so fast?" "Good years go by quickly," Vince replied, his arm around her waist. "And these have been very good years." Looking around at her family, at the farm visible through the windows, at the life they had built together, Willow had to agree. These had been very good years indeed. They had faced challenges, certainly. They had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical. But they had faced everything together, their partnership only deepening with time. As evening fell and the celebration wound down, Willow found herself back in the spot where she and Vince had stood on her 50th birthday, looking at the transformed soil where it had all begun. Vince joined her there, as she had known he would. "Still the richest soil on the property," he said, crouching to examine the earth. "Of course it is," Willow replied. "It has had the most attention and the most love for the longest time. That makes all the difference." Vince stood and looked at her with such love that it took her breath away, even after all these years. "Like us," he said. "We have been growing together the longest, tending to each other the most carefully, and look how rich our life has become." "The richest life I could imagine," Willow agreed. They stood together in the fading light, two people who had taken rocky soil and determination and built something beautiful. Around them, their farm thrived, testimony to decades of hard work and careful stewardship. Behind them, their house glowed with light and echoed with family. Ahead of them, whatever years remained would be faced together as they had faced everything else. "I love you," Willow said, the words as true now as they had been when she first spoke them 35 years ago. "I love you too," Vince replied, pulling her close. "Today, tomorrow, and always." As darkness fell over the California desert, two people stood in a field that had once been nothing but rocks and hard, packed earth. Now it produced abundant vegetables, supported a thriving farm, and stood as proof that with determination and love, anything could be transformed. Rocky soil had become fertile ground. A desperate young woman and a drifting cowboy had become partners and soulmates. And together, they had harvested a beautiful life, rich and full and deeply satisfying. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Spring brought planting, summer brought growth, fall brought harvest, and winter brought rest and planning for the next season. Through all the seasons, through all the years, Willow and Vince remained constant, their love for each other and for the land they tended never wavering. In their later years, they spent more time simply being together, walking the farm, watching their grandchildren grow, sharing memories and making new ones. The work that had defined so much of their life together became less central, replaced by the quiet contentment of a life well lived. Vince sometimes joked that he had become soft, no longer working from dawn to dusk as he had in his younger years. But Willow knew better. He had not become soft. He had become content, and that was different. They had both earned their contentment through decades of hard work and dedication. On a clear evening in late summer, when Willow was 62 and Vince 64, they sat on their porch watching another sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. It was a scene they had witnessed thousands of times, but it never grew old. Each sunset was unique, just as each day of their life together had been unique. "Willow," Vince said quietly, "if you could go back and tell that young woman struggling with rocky soil anything, what would you say?" Willow thought about it. "I would tell her that she is not alone, even though she feels that way. I would tell her that help is coming, in the form of a kind cowboy who will see the value in what she is trying to do. I would tell her that the rocky soil will eventually become productive and that the struggle will be worth it. And I would tell her that she is stronger than she knows." "That is good," Vince said. "And if you could tell that cowboy anything, what would you say?" "I would tell him to stop," Willow said with a smile. "I would tell him not to ride past, to definitely stop and talk to the woman working in that impossible garden. I would tell him that stopping will be the best decision he ever makes, and that it will lead to a life richer than he can imagine. I would tell him to be brave enough to offer help and to stay long enough to fall in love." "He was falling in love from that first conversation," Vince said softly. He just did not recognize it yet. "Were you really?" Willow asked, surprised despite all the years between then and now. "Really," Vince confirmed. "There was something about you, the determination in your stance, the hope in your eyes despite the impossible task you had set yourself. You were not defeated by the rocky soil. You were challenged by it. And I thought, this is a woman worth knowing. This is a woman worth standing beside." "And you did stand beside me," Willow said, her voice thick with emotion. "Through everything, you stood beside me. You helped me turn rocky soil into productive land. You helped me turn a desperate dream into a thriving reality. You helped me grow a beautiful life from almost nothing." "We did it together," Vince said, taking her hand. "That is the important part. Together." As the last light faded and the stars began to appear, they remained on the porch, comfortable in their silence and in their togetherness. The farm around them was quiet now, settled for the night. Cattle grazed peacefully in distant pastures. Vegetables grew in neat rows, ready for the next morning's harvest. Chickens roosted safely in their coop. Everything was in its place, everything was as it should be. And in the morning they would wake and begin another day, tending to their land and their life together. There would be work to do, always work to do on a farm. But it was work they loved, work that had meaning, work that they did together. This was the beautiful life they had harvested from rocky soil and determination. This was the reward for decades of partnership and love. And as Willow sat beside Vince, his hand warm in hers, she knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single thing about the journey that had brought them here. The rocky soil had taught them patience and persistence. The vegetables had taught them care and attention. The seasons had taught them rhythm and cycles. And their love had taught them that together, anything was possible. From that first day when a determined young woman worked impossible soil, and a kind cowboy stopped to help, to this evening when an elderly couple sat contentedly on their porch surveying a life well lived, the story had unfolded perfectly. It was not always easy. It was not always comfortable. But it was always theirs, built together, grown together, harvested together. The beautiful life they had grown in rocky soil would continue in their children and grandchildren, in the farm that would be passed down through generations, in the lessons they had learned and shared. It was a legacy more valuable than money, more lasting than buildings. It was a legacy of love and partnership, of hard work and determination, of transforming the impossible into the abundant. And as they finally rose from the porch and went inside to rest, ready for another day in their beautiful life together, they carried with them the deep satisfaction of knowing they had done well. They had taken rocky soil and grown not just vegetables, but a life of meaning and love. They had helped each other harvest a beautiful life, and that harvest would sustain them all their days.